Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending upon your time zone. This is Mike O'Connor from NuVoodoo. We're going to give attendees just a moment. We see a few people logging in, trying to get their screens up and running. So we'll start here at 1 past the hour. And I see a number of you just logged in the last 30 seconds. We're going to give just about 15 more seconds before we get going. See lots of screens coming on here. This appears to be one of our more popular webinars as well. It should be. Lots of quarter hours to be racked up at the workplace. And I am Mike O'Connor. I'm the Executive Vice President for Marketing here at NuVoodoo Media Services. Prior to that, about a 25-year career wearing the ratings monkey on my back as a programmer and corporate weenie for various big companies. Welcome to our first in our fall webinar series. And this one I think is our most popular and the one that I get most excited about because it really is an opportunity to maximize ratings and a chance to do more with less. And we call this the How to Win the Workplace War, our 2019 edition. This will take about 30 minutes, including your questions. And Executive Vice President Lee Jacobs, he's our head of research, will be standing by to take you through fresh data from NuVoodoo's Ratings Prospects Study XIV. We fielded it just this past June, so a little over a month ago. You can chat in questions throughout the webinar. We won't be pausing to take questions while we give the presentation, but Jake, our producer, will mine the chats for all the representative questions, and we'll stay here until we answer every one, eliminating some duplicates. Of all the various types of ratings-driven marketing programs we execute for clients here at NuVoodoo, nothing helps deliver our biggest and most consistent wins for our clients than when we focus on that subset of listeners who spend time with audio entertainment of any type, but especially FM radio and AM radio during the workday at their place of employment. We won't be upselling any of our services today. We'll spare you the sales pitches, but you will get a first-hand look at our data-driven approach, our playbook for helping our clients juice the ratings at work, reach likely ratings participants, and direct listening in our client station's favor. So that we could make room for our questionnaire, for some new findings. Before we get started on Lee's presentation today, let me cover some of the questions that we keep getting answers to over and over and over again. We've done 13 studies since 2012. We do them twice a year now, especially with digital being such a moving target. And this is what we always find. Finding number one, money talks. Diary keepers and panelists are in it for the money. It is the number one reason they opt in, and that makes radio cash contesting a powerful tool for boosting listening occasions. And this holds true for consumers who consume audio entertainment during the workday. So whether they fit our profile for being a likely ratings respondent or not, more than half of all at-work listeners in past studies, as you see on the screen here from 18 months ago, report changing their behavior as the result of expressing strong interest in radio station sweepstakes involving cash or cash equivalents. Older, more female segment that makes up Pandora's Workday Prime audience is especially vulnerable to these types of incentives. So while it's never likely that radio will ever return to its days of complete dominance of the audio spectrum at work, focusing on the workplace gives us the chance to game the system a little bit, to rent listening, perhaps just enough to eke out a key demo rank position over a competitor that you're neck and neck with. Number two, listening appointments. We find this to be true virtually every time we've asked this question. Yeah, when you offer respondents the opportunity to pick from among drive time hours, those always do the best. But when the goal is to broadly engage the workday audience and maximize your listening and help make tough decisions in the face of a limited cash budget you might have for contesting, we find that choosing early in the workday always gives us our clients an edge. And today, Lee is going to show you some new and very compelling evidence of the massive TSL edge that comes from workday terrestrial radio listening, and winning the battle for eardrums when folks first arrive at the office in the morning can have a huge impact, not just on vertical TSL, but especially horizontal TSL. Number 3, contest mechanisms. Now, the data you're seeing on the screen is, or that we're about to show, is from 2018, about 18 months ago. The fact of the matter is that if you were with us in January, the spread between these mechanisms really widened some more, making call in to win the least preferable mechanism of the big 3 or 4 that we test, with text to win and register to win always being the preferred contest activation paths during the workday. And so we didn't test that again, since we have data available on our website at nuvoodoo.com/webinars. You can go to our archives and get that information from our January study. So as was the case when we studied workers 18 months ago, and again with our broader sample from January, the lesson our audience teaches us over and over again is don't get greedy by asking for too much personal information when it comes to collecting database or contest registrations. I don't want to give you my birthday or physical street address, so please stop asking, and I'm much more likely to play your game. We have ways of doing age verification on our web forms that don't involve somebody having to give up their snail mail address or their birth date. Number 4, phone calls from radio stations. How do most people feel about telemarketing? Well, not good at all. You can see that just by looking at the PPM no sample from 2018. With more than half registering phone calls of any type from telemarketers as a bad to neutral thing at best. But despite the fact that phone calls from telemarketers aren't popular, we do make an exception for likely panelists and diary keepers. If the radio station is calling to give them an offer to win cash, the numbers go up. And that profile holds true for the audience subset spending time with radio at the office or job site during working hours, even ones who may not necessarily be likely to accept a meter or a diary. In 2018, about 6 in 10 rated a phone call like that as a good thing, and less than 15% would be put off. And our call center recordings, which we monitor for every client, really do back that up. Very rarely do we hear the kind of outrage and upset that you might associate with an intrusive call into somebody's home. And unlike residential telemarketing, where landlines installation is down and call blocking is way up, do not call lists have made the tactic virtually a non-starter for impacting ratings, especially cost effectively in 2019. But as we found, businesses generally answer the phones. We don't have the same tough regulations when we're talking about live agent delivered messages on your behalf. So, and compared to digital tactics, which we absolutely endorse, and we'll show you some compelling evidence here in our new study about which platforms offer you that best upside. We reach critical mass faster when we're doing any kind of data capture game, because we can build up the list of contest participants faster than any other tactic that I know of. And finally, number 5, the leverage opportunity that at work marketing and programming provides. And that's in the workplace. When our people are both surfing and listening to terrestrial radio, for example. Well, that is during weekday prime. So the old kind of watch and surf factor that we see at night for TV clients, well, this is the same factor that's going on during the workday. Somebody's on their mobile phone or at their desktop and listening to the radio simultaneously. So digital campaigns from 6A to 7P really do give you the chance to capitalize on that behavior. Workplace listening is a target-rich environment for measured listening. We're going to give you updated stats today, but as of early 2018, terrestrial radio listeners were nearly twice as likely to carry a meter or fill out a diary if part of their listening occurred at work. And as I turn things over to Lee Jacobs, our June study takes an even deeper dive into that potential leverage in 2019 for radio stations that are waging workplace warfare.
Thank you, Mike. And so let's let those 2018 at-work numbers burn in for just a moment. 39% among the total sample, 56% among the PPM susceptibles, and 59% among the diary susceptibles. Then I'll show you the new data. It looks like this. trended against the 2018 data showing growth in almost every breakout and strong returns among 25-44s and continued lift among those who we care about the most, those likely to show up in the rating samples that determine the fates of our stations, up to 60% in either of those groups saying that they listen to the radio or some type of streaming music service while they work. But let's do this introduction a little more formally. These new data come from NuVoodoo Ratings Prospects Study XIV, fielded May 31st and June 1st this year, using compensated online sample as we do all of our research at NuVoodoo, so that respondents start out with at least one thing in common with Nielsen respondents: they're getting paid for their opinions. Over 3,000 respondents in this new sample, ages 14 to 54 across all 48 ppm markets. The sample is proportional to market population, so there are more interviews from New York and LA than there are from, say, Hartford and Memphis. And it is proportional across all of those 48 markets for gender and ethnicity and age across the group of markets. So we've already shown that the big news, that there's so much at-work listening going on, and it pegs the meter among those in the top quintile of FM listeners, those listening at least 2 hours a day. It's a little tautological, since if you're going to end up spending 2+ hours per day with the radio, there's a pretty strong chance that at least some of it is going to occur while you're at work, to just build up that much time. Also, we see strong returns among habitual listeners, the horizontal folks who spend at least 5 days, 5, 6, 7 days listening to FM. 55% of those folks are listening to the radio or some type of streaming music service while they work. And of course, the headwind is that we're not alone any longer. It used to be that, sure, there was, Muzak that some workplace had, but for the most part, if you were listening to audio while you were working, it was probably terrestrial radio. Now we face headwinds from pure play digitals. The good news in these data, even though I'm not showing you the trend, I can tell you compared to 18 months ago, that percentage saying that they're using our digital streams, the terrestrial digital streams, is up from 9% up to 15%. You do see the deep digital usage that Mike had referred to, particularly among women, and we feel that in terms of reduced PUM levels and reduced listening levels in diaries in the midday. And so shares remain stable, but maybe the ratings start creeping down a little bit. The great news is that we can drag some of those folks back. After all, pure play digitals aren't perfect either. Their music streams sometimes have limited variety, or sometimes kind of clunky repetition factors, and additionally the commercial inventory that are included in the unpaid, the free versions, can be repetitious as the dickens. Among those folks who are in the top quintile of FM listeners, only 28% are with digital pure plays, and the big horizontal wide listeners, 40%, are dipping their toes or maybe giving their ears over to digital. But the good news is we've got a lot of their time. If they're using terrestrial radio 5, 6, or 7 days, we probably got them in the drive times, and we have an opportunity to try to sway them to coming back. And we've had strong experience in getting them back, at least for a while, using contest tactics. Even male-oriented formats are feeling the pinch, but you can see some of the biggest problems are among format P1s, and this is a wide group of format P1s, including contemporary Christian, by the way, who are using a radio or some type of streaming music service while they work. I was referring to the big wide horizontal listeners because the programming discussion is often about, are we trying to get them to listen more today or trying to get them to come back again tomorrow? And Mike made reference to the fact that he spent 20 years with the ratings monkey on his back, and so did I. So I've lived in that trench and worried about those things. So when you drill down to those who are in our total sample or the group who listen to terrestrial at work, among the group who listen to terrestrial at least 5 days a week, there's a lot more at-work listening going on. And think about it this way. If you listen to terrestrial just 1 day per week, 10% of that group spends at least an hour with terrestrial. 2 days a week, they spend It's 8% who spend an hour per day. And you see how the time spent listening climbs up among those who were more habitual. We are trying to make that behavior because they'll end up giving us more time, and we're playing to the folks who are likely to give us the most time. So we need to structure our contests so that there's a reason for them to come back tomorrow. And by the way, sometimes it's as simple as reminding them that they should come back tomorrow. They had a great time today, and we'll have more of the things that they were enjoying tomorrow. Landline telephones, how's it going? Of course it's going down. Just how fast is really the question. I've trended these data back to 2014 when 46% were unplugged from landline phones. Now it's up to 59%, and among the 41% who remained, who are still tethered to a landline at home, we're down to just 13%. So that's about 1 in 8 overall who you might be able to get to pick up a landline phone if you called them, which we don't recommend.
Yeah, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation today, workplace phone calls have none of those barriers. So we tend to get through and talk to most workplaces, a few voicemails, a couple of busy signals, but our penetration rate 75%, and our response rates usually, depending upon the type of program, around 30%.
So then it's about how to get noticed at work. Telemarketing into workplaces is certainly one great tool, but in terms of more mass media, digital media, where do they notice ads? And that's what they're answering to show up on this page. And we see YouTube at the top of this heap, website advertising in general, websites being a place that people notice ads, Facebook as well, direct mail, billboards, TV, if you can find a way to make CPMs work out for you in that case. Instagram, we know, has much better ad placement capability than Snapchat, even though the two are, kind of competing in deep, rock throwing competition. Smartphone apps have a place these days, as well as email campaigns. And you'll note that among the truly heavy listeners, the top quintile spending at least 2 hours a day with FM, they give pretty strong numbers to noticing ads on the radio as well. And those are the folks who are first going to hear, new music you've added, changes in positioning, new contests, events, station appearances. Those are the folks who will hear about it first. If you drill down to the folks who use FM at work specifically, you see which tools will get to them the quickest. And don't write off those who are using digital at work currently, those who show up in yellow here, because they're still susceptible. We have strong experience that says we can drag them back with the right kinds of offers. We may not keep them forever, but we can woo them back to us when we need them most. So let's look at contest prizes that we can use to chum the water to get them over. Now, we chose to look at things outside just packagings of cash this time. And we look at a lot of prizes often, but this time what raced up to the top was free gas for a year. Wow. And this, by the way, I should point out, this study was in the field before the situation in Iran had gotten as tense as it is today. So maybe May 31st and June 1st, people weren't quite so worried about their gas price going up. But even with that, some fairly pocketbook issues showed up with strong returns this time. Free gas for a year. Your mortgage or rent paid for 3 months. Imagine not thinking about your utility bills for a quarter. But at the same time, giving away $500 twice a workday still has tremendous weight behind it. $100 an hour, theoretically every hour 9 to 5, although we have experience that says in some markets $100 isn't enough to move the meter, isn't enough to get people to come pick the prize up. And of course, this is always the competitive situation of what will your prize sound like up against your competitor's prize. You'll also note at the bottom the national contest that we chummed into this, a chance to win $5,000 every hour 9 to 5, but you'll be playing against people from all over the country for the prizes. That shows up a good deal lower. On the other hand, we can tell you from other data that people aren't generally aware of the fact that these contests can be played across groups, and as long as you're not advertising it, it's up to your competitor to try to squeak out that you're the ones doing it. But in the main, it's a fairly small percentage who are aware that there are any group contests going on. And among the group who are aware, it nets down to single digits who think it's a bad idea, because some folks figure, well, more stations playing the game, the prizes are probably bigger. So keep that in mind. Radio station benefits that benefit at-work listeners. When we ask how interested would you be in a station that advertised different things, what floats up to the top among those who listen to FM at work, playing 50% fewer commercials, the times of commercial-free hours, or only stopping the music for commercials once an hour. And the idea of maybe a wider variety, and then contest ideas as well. So we'd say, why not put those together and package your commercial-free cash with your music sweeps, which even at a $500 price point looks pretty strong, particularly among those listening to FM during the workday. And what are the main advantages among at-work listeners for listening? What are the main advantages that FM has? Well, number one, there's no subscription fee. But among those listening to FM at work, pretty strong percentage really appreciate that we're connected with their local community. Strong percentage say that we have hosts and personalities, people that they relate to and like. And you'll note that's a pretty strong return among those folks who are listening to digital during the workday, giving us the notion that, hey, maybe we want to push our personalities up to a high enough level that, yeah, I would like to have an occasional visit from that personality that I enjoy other times while I'm listening at work. And finally, when was the last time a radio station, well, did a whole variety of things for you? Over half say a radio station made them laugh or played a great song in the last week. 53%, 51% respectively. Made you feel great? 44%, surprised you with something other than a song, about 3 and 8, 37%, or just made you feel appreciated, like they cared that you had tuned in, 26%. It seems to us that percentage could go up. And by the way, if I just drill it down to those who say it's at least within the last week or the last day, you see how the numbers rise among those who listen to FM at work. And from the way we see it, all of these things could be tuned up a little higher. I mean, after all, if we made you laugh or surprised you with a great song or made you feel great, or at bare minimum, just made you know how much we appreciated you tuning in, how much more likely it is that you'll tune in again tomorrow and continue the process and help us build the quarter hours that we need to win the ratings war. So that's a whole lot of us talking. Jake, Mike, what's the group asked back?
Jake is going to get to all of your questions. Please chat them in now, and we're glad to revisit some slides. This is not a deck we'll be sending out. However, you will receive a video recording in your inbox to the email address you used to sign up for this webinar. And I'll remind you, there's a part 2 to this that we're going to do in September, just after the Labor Day break. And a lot of the same data that you'll see will be parsed by specific demo and specific format partisanship. We wanted to keep the focus on the broad at-work listening opportunity for this first one. And in addition to that, we'll be taking a deeper dive into digital. We'll be showing you not only the ad channels that that people are using where they pay attention to commercials and paid advertising. We'll be showing you the usage rate that's daily or more for every format and for all the significant demos. We'll also be showing you the chronic digital use rate. I think we were out at the WWRS in March, and we showed some data that suggested that the number of people using Facebook 10 times a day was still greater than the number of people in certain demos that didn't use Facebook at all or used it less than once a week. So that's the kind of data we're going to give you. We also did some studies about what channels people say they pay attention to videos online. So if you're running a video pre-roll schedule to support your ratings, there is definitely a difference between the channels. So we'll uncover all of that. Should be another 20 to 25 minute session. We'll also get into contest prizes by format. So this should have given you enough time to chat in your questions. And Jake, you fire them off, and Lee and I will answer them until we're done.
Great. First question is, in past webinars, we've mentioned that more people are using social media. The more people that use social media, the more likely listeners are to be a part of the panel. What's the relationship with social media use and listening to AM or FM at work?
Well, it's like the perfect storm. With the ratings inclined, we see increased usage of social media, increased time spent listening to the medium tracks with that, as it does with listening at work. And when you round all that up and imagine that we have the opportunity while they're at work, in most cases, to communicate with them through social media or digital channels, that becomes a pretty compelling way to get in touch and try to influence their behavior.
Great. Next question is, cash, has always been king in the past. Now, it looks like gas is top of mind. Should I be focused on a gas-based contest in the fall instead of just cash?
Cash is always going to win in in one of these studies. In fact, we've started removing cash just because the answer is cash and everything else. So cash equivalents always beat what I like to call format prizes, the flyaways, the ticket giveaways. There's some formats like country where, if you're doing like an 8-band jam, it's an invite-only promotion. That can test out almost as well as cash, but that's the rarity. And we're going to show you the full litany of contest prizes. We studied them in January, so you've actually got access to that data right away. But the point here is that with all of the companies that are doing the $1,000 an hour type national contests across the country, we feel like you might need to package your cash to stand out or to be strategic. So good, Lee mentioned one example of being both strategic and tactical, which is to tie appointments, particularly early in the workday, to your workday kickoff music sweep and calling it something like commercial-free cash, which we do a lot of with our clients. An idea for spoken word, looking at that gas research, and this again is before there is an oil crisis and things heat up in the Middle East, is to tie your gas cash equivalent giveaways to traffic and weather together, so that you're parking your appointments at a time where you're putting your best foot forward among the broadest audience, which is going to be the audience that uses you for service elements during drive time. So it's a way of packaging cash in order to meet a strategic goal.
Great. Next question is, if I can get my computer to work, there we go. Do you know what technology I would think they being likely panelists are using to listen to digital at work, i.e. desktop, mobile, etc.?
It's a split. And of course, most distressingly for anyone operating in a PPM market is all too often digital media, even our streams, can be consumed with earbuds, and especially in light of the Lightning connector on an Apple device, the idea that they're actually going to tether that through their meter is scary indeed.
Yeah, the old days of a one office blaring at work, something everybody can agree on. Hey, we still get that. Beauty salons, hair salons are the kind of the number one business category that converts when we do telemarketing programs. But the fact of the matter is we can infer that it's an awful lot of personal device listening because the number of earbuds, and we've asked the question so many times now, the earbud factor is high in the workplace.
Great. Next question is, could you cite a specific example or marketing activity that increased at-work listening for a station or digital music offering?
I can, obviously we work with a lot of clients, but our two kind of favorite tactics packaged together is a digital media plan coupled with telemarketing, workplace telemarketing. I'd say it breaks into two types. We'll do what I like to refer to as appointment setting phone calls as a national contest, or when a radio station doesn't have that intermediate hoop asking people to sign up and listen for their name at work. Think about instant win, text to win, call in to win in response to song of the day. The mechanism is generally up to the program director and the marketing person, but the tactics would be appointment setting, telemarketing, coupled with digital, because after all, people at work, they're surfing and they're listening. We want to try to get all over their mobile phone, all over their desktop computer with messages about what's in it for me and when to listen. And then the other type, of course, and this is probably the more, I guess, tried and true at work type promotion, which involves collecting a huge database of participants as quickly as you can, announcing names, knowing that you're only going to pay off some of the time, and that allows you to stretch your cash budget over more weeks than you would if you were doing a fixed type of promotion. So those are generally local giveaways. The appointment setting campaigns we run are more often national contests, but both have moved the meter. I would say not using telemarketing puts your at-work leverage at risk. I know nobody likes the idea of workers that don't necessarily represent the radio station making phone calls on their behalf, but it's a tactic that still moves the needle in 2019.
Great. Next question is, in asking listeners to sign up on the website first with name and phone number and city, then telling them to listen for their name to be called during the workday in order to win, if they hear it, they have to call in to claim their prize. So the question is that too much work for listeners?
It's a lot of work, so you have to put a lot of resources into it. We try to talk stations out of it if their promotional window is too small, because even with a robust telemarketing budget, it still takes time to get through the list. And the other thing I would say is that when you adopt that name game type of promotion, it's really important to stick with it and not just do it as a one-off, because you are right, whoever answered the question, there is that intermediate hoop. So the benefit you get from the intermediate hoop is you get that mental commitment. You take one action, and then all you have to do is passively participate for the rest of the promotional period. But then alternatively, if you're just offering an incentive that's tied to something that requires no intermediate activation, but simply an immediate response, such as a text when you hear the cue, that theoretically opens up to a broader coalition of folks but it's less of a mental commitment. So without phone calls and a understanding of how to do a digital data capture program, we'd probably steer you in the direction of instant win that doesn't require the hoop. But if you do have the resources and can do that kind of two-tiered digital data capture with office phone calls, those are some of our biggest wins.
Yeah, and I should add in that it's critically important on a name game type promotion that you're celebrating who does win constantly, because if you want me to keep coming back day after day after day in hopes of winning because I did register, you got to tell me all the time that at least somebody else won. Maybe it's my turn tomorrow.
Yeah, we're actually going to show you that data in September. The fact is, we've become known for asking about, whether or not the listeners perceive that radio station contests are rigged. Bad news, the numbers don't look very good for us. The good news is this time we asked, well, what should we do about it? So we'll have that data for you in September.
Great. I think you essentially answered this next question, which is what is the best way for a top 40 radio station to reach its at-work listeners? If there's anything else you want to expound upon.
Yeah, I would say for at work, you're really talking to 25 to 34s, 25, 39s. So obviously this is going to be your most digitally savvy crowd, and so you'll find that mixing YouTube, Instagram, and some kind of programmatic video buy probably will yield the best upside in terms of reach. But just remember who's answering the phone at the workplace. We've got, I think, this idea. It's the person counting their days to retirement, who's in his or her early 50s, who's the gatekeeper for the rest of the office. The reality is generally it's a younger, lower-paid staffer that is, assigned to answer the general business line. And so top 40 stations should look at that data again when it comes through in your inbox tomorrow. The 2534 is probably the #1 opportunity. And of course, there's also direct mail, but we tell you that under the age of 25, don't waste your money on direct mail. The youngest demos have figured out how to conduct the business of everyday life on their mobile phone. So they're not going to the mailbox to collect bills. We start to see the numbers for direct mail receptivity fall off as of college age and obviously high school age. They're just not checking the mail these days. 25 plus, completely different story.
Great. Next question is, we said that this is a sample of over 3,000 respondents from all the PPM markets. They want to know if we can gather samples large enough to do music testing and perceptuals for stations in that way.
Yep, absolutely a core part of our business. We do weekly music testing for dozens of radio stations with samples ranging from 75 to 100 or over 100 people in some cases, screened to be their key listeners and appropriate percentages of the the competitors that they're most concerned with, usually in tight age ranges. We can deliver those compared to an old-fashioned auditorium music test where you get a field service recruited group of respondents of 100 respondents who are pretty much all within a 5-mile radius of whatever hotel meeting room you use. We get respondents from around the market in a very representative sample. And perceptuals, same thing, however you want it screened, core part of what our research business does. So absolutely. And generally, since we feel ethically better about it because we're paying respondents at the far end of this instead of paying an intermediary telephone agent who says, so let me ask you some questions. In this case, they're able to self-administer the interview on the other side, and they get money for doing it.
Great. Next question. I think this question, I think I'm going to paraphrase it. Is an online listen for your name registration or texting in to win a better component to use?
So you got to know what you're doing with online register to win. One of the biggest and dirtiest secrets is that when you just put a bunch of display ads out there and you're just looking at the click-through rate, you're not recognizing the fact that most people are, on most social media, they don't like to leave social media. And the second thing is nobody likes to tap out a whole bunch of personal information on their mobile phone on a radio station webpage. And a couple of these ad platforms have developed tools that overcome both of those things. Facebook, Instagram offers something called Facebook Lead Gen, which we use religiously because otherwise the cost of acquisition can be $50 or $60 per registration when you apply a pixel to the thank you page that serves to somebody after they've signed up for your contest online, and you basically measure the number of conversions against the total ad spend that it took to get them in the registration box, and you just go, oh my God, I mean, I should have done telemarketing. It's a cheaper cost of acquisition. So the answer is you need to know what you're doing with digital. And if you don't, and you don't have the budget to hire a third party like us, then I would say texting is a wonderful activation mechanism. It's open broadly to anybody with a phone who's interested. There is no intermediate hoop, and it gives you the ability to do instant reaction, which is not surprisingly why more and more national contests are now text to win. And they have the benefit of not requiring the marketing of an 800 number. Which kind of tips the hand that it's a national contest and potentially opens up the radio station queue to being exploited by the competitor. As far as we advise our clients, with not so well defended contests to hammer them for conducting a rigged national contest and then using the multi-city factor that they're trying to hide against them. It's not right for every format, but it can be a powerful weapon.
Great. Next question is, do you see success with spotlighting a workforce member of the day? And is that a good way to increase at-work listening?
So yes, for station imaging and building, obviously, if the workforce member can be subject to some sort of incentive, it's that much better, especially incentive that requires them to be present on your radio station when the workforce salute occurs. But remember, just having that. So from a tactical, what will juice diaries or meters? Probably you need some kind of you need some kind of inducement to go along with that. But more broadly speaking, just recognizing people who are working and listening to your radio station, especially if you can be specific, using first and last name, not being afraid of where they live or even where they work, because that level of specificity will then lead to a conversation away from the radio. Maybe it's the friend who meets him at the gym and finds out that, and mentions that they heard him give you a salute at work. So anything you can do, as long as you're specific and it's not just, hey, this is Mike from Atlanta working, or Mike from Atlanta is working. We really appreciate him listening to WXYZ at work. Well, everybody knows a Mike from Atlanta. The key is to be specific. So I would say brand lift. If you do that and do it consistently. In fact, a little secret I can give you is one of the things we advise our telemarketing clients to do is to read off the names of people that are on the contact list or that we've contacted, and just start saluting them and saying, hey, shout out to, I'll just use my name, Mike O'Connor from Austin, Texas. I appreciate you listening to, and I'll just pick our Austin radio station, LBJ at work. Mike's trying to win, the $500 Song of the Day contest, and we got another chance for him and the rest of you to win at 5 o'clock this afternoon. So you could kind of embed the specific acknowledgement into a generic message about your work-related promotion.
And I'll take it one step further. Record that if you have email address for them, and send them a recording.
Right on. Thank you. Next question is, in a small market with a small promotional budget, is $50 too small of an amount to give away several times a day, or should I do a larger number just once or twice a day?
Lee, I'll let you go first because I do have an opinion about that.
Yeah, I would go for the larger amount. We've seen that in some cases $100 won't even get picked up. That probably wouldn't be the case in the kind of market you've described, but at least $100. $100 is enough to feel, to really change somebody's life, maybe just for that day, but certainly make them feel good.
So mine's a two-part answer. We've done this study 14 times. It's always between 3,000 and 5,000 respondents, and we always stratify the people who fit our modeling questions for PPM and diary methodology. I know we only study the top 55-ish markets, generally speaking, but we actually ask the diary placement series of questions and the PPM placement questions as a way of trying to model in those that are more likely to be a ratings participant or potentially are in the panel or in the diary keeping universe. We try not to ask that question just because we represent too many stations in too many different markets, and Nielsen gets fugly when you do that. But my point is that when we stratify the likely ratings respondents socioeconomically, we've seen a big change that started really, what would you say, Lee, 2017? Maybe a little earlier, 2016, but it's been in the last 2 to 3 years. In terms of the panel skewing far less downscale than it used to.
Great point. And thus, $50, not so interesting, but you have to know your market. But $100 does at least get my attention. I mean, that's a nice spiff.
So the part two answer is going to be sort of like the Robert Mueller testimony today. It's neither side's getting what they want out of them. So the other side of the equation is whenever we test frequency over quantity, frequency always wins every time we do it. $100, 10 times a day, $1,000 one time a day. But what I would tell you is the most important for playing the workday game, the most important thing to do is putting your best foot forward early in the workday. And so I would tell you that you just saw our horizontal listening data where you have almost I think it was a 50% greater probability of getting somebody to actually or recall listening over a 5-day period. But you got to play for the eardrum the first part of the workday, so 8:30, 9 o'clock, I would park a prize incentive of the maximum that you can afford across 5 days a week, tied to a commercial-free offering if you're a music station, some other benefit if you're not, strategic benefit, early in the workday, and focus on horizontal occasions, and don't worry so much about spreading your money throughout the day. That would be the way to maximize budget in a small budget in 2019 to maximize the return.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for your questions.
Great. We'll see you in September for part 2. The recording should arrive sometime around this time tomorrow.
Thanks, everybody.